Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. New York, Midtown Manhattan, in the middle of the morning. The skyscrapers shimmered in the rays of a timid sun, and the reflections in the glass transformed the streets into a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. The city buzzed, taxis honked, hurried passers-by walked briskly, and the wind carried papers and advertising flyers along the sidewalk. In the majestic lobby of the Ritz-Carlton, Victoria Armstrong, a 42-year-old black woman, entered with the grace and confidence of a leader who knows exactly what she's worth. Dressed in a perfectly tailored cream suit, her high heels clicked on the polished marble, drawing attention unintentionally. Her hair was styled in a flawless chignon, and her face radiated calm, determination, and natural authority. Victoria wasn't just a CEO. She was the founder and majority shareholder of Armstrong Industries, a multinational specializing in green technologies and renewable energies. For 20 years, she had transformed her small startup into an industrial empire capable of competing with the world's largest companies. Every decision she made was strategic, every action measured. That day, she was there to finalize a $2 billion contract with Henry Caldwell, a New York billionaire known for his arrogance and contempt for women and people of color. Caldwell, a white man in his 50s, always impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, was known for humiliating those he dealt with in order to intimidate them and make them believe that his money and power were the only criteria for competence. As Victoria walked toward the conference table, Caldwell, already seated and flanked by his assistants, looked up. A condescending smile stretched across his lips. "That's surprising," he murmured aloud, loud enough for the journalists and executives present to hear. He didn't yet know that he had just met a woman who not only surpassed his arrogance but would publicly humiliate him, without even raising her voice. Victoria settled in, placed her documents on the table, and calmly observed Caldwell. Every movement she made exuded a mixture of quiet strength and calculated precision. The journalists present instinctively moved closer, sensing that what was about to unfold would be more than a simple financial negotiation. Caldwell spoke first, in a tone full of self-importance. "Miss Armstrong, are you certain you can handle a contract of this magnitude?" Victoria looked him straight in the eyes, a slight smile on her lips, and replied, "I think we're going to get along very well, Henry. But first and foremost, I believe some truths need to be clarified." Hidden within that simple sentence was the promise of a monumental shock. Caldwell was still unaware that he had just triggered his own humiliation, and that Victoria Armstrong, a black woman and founder of a $2 billion empire, would turn the situation against him with total mastery. The hall, the sun, the looks of the journalists and executives, everything seemed suspended in that precise moment. And Victoria, impassive, knew she already had the game won. The lobby of the Ritz-Carlton vibrated with palpable tension. Journalists adjusted their cameras, financial executives whispered among themselves, and Henry Caldwell, standing behind the large mahogany table, wore his usual sneering smile. Victoria Armstrong, calm and elegant, began her presentation with a clear and confident voice. She detailed her project, a revolutionary green energy program capable of having the carbon footprint of major American cities in less than 5 years. Graphs scrolled across the screen, the figures seemed irrefutable. But Caldwell wasn't there to listen. He interrupted Victoria several times, sneering and making condescending remarks. "I assume you've never managed a project of this scale before, have you? Do you really think you can manage $2 billion without help?" The murmurs in the room intensified. Some executives looked away, uncomfortable, while journalists noted every word, anticipating the scandal. Caldwell played his role as the dominant figure, humiliating Victoria in front of everyone. Victoria felt her anger rising, but she kept it perfectly in check. Every gesture, every movement, every breath was calculated. She knew her patience would eventually pay off. At one point, Caldwell chuckled in front of reporters, implying that Victoria had obtained her position through connections or outside support. "I don't doubt your energy, but I wonder if you truly have the experience for a transaction of this magnitude." Victoria looked him straight in the eyes and calmly replied, My experience is exactly what this project needs, Henry. But it seems you're not here to discuss skills. Caldwell frowned, irritated. The murmurs grew louder. The audience began to sense that something was about to happen. Victoria, unflappable, knew she held all the cards. She had yet to reveal the truth that would turn the situation completely in her favor. As Caldwell continued his verbal harassment, Victoria took a deep breath, adjusted her documents, and prepared her plan. He would soon discover that humiliating a black woman like her was not just a mistake, it was a disaster waiting to happen for him. After 10 minutes of incessant interruptions and condescension from Henry Caldwell, Victoria Armstrong remained standing, calm, but with a look of icy determination. She knew exactly what Caldwell didn't. He had just underestimated the founder and majority shareholder of Armstrong Industries, a woman who had built an empire from nothing. As he continued to sneer and interrupt every sentence, Victoria gently raised her hand, asking for silence. The room fell silent. Even Caldwell hesitated, intrigued by the imposing calm of this woman whom he had thought easily intimidated. "Henry," she said in a calm but firm voice, "I think it's time to clarify a few points." She turned to her computer and activated a projector, displaying an official document on the screen behind them. All eyes turned to the table, the official register of shareholders of Armstrong Industries. The document clearly stated: Victoria Armstrong, founder and majority shareholder, 60% of the shares. A murmur rippled through the room. The journalists began filming frantically. The financial executives, previously intimidated by Caldwell, exchanged surprised and hesitant glances. Caldwell himself paled. A flush rose to his cheeks, but he tried to maintain his composure. Victoria didn't pause. Her voice was clear, cold, and confident. "You've spent the last 10 minutes underestimating and belittling me in front of all these witnesses. You didn't realize that I'm the one who controls this company, and that every major financial decision goes through me." She paused, letting each word permeate the room. Every switch, every camera, every gaze was turned towards her. Caldwell, furious but silent, finally understood that he had just made a monumental mistake. Victoria added, almost with a quiet smile, "That $2 billion contract, that you thought you could sign so easily. I'm canceling it." An icy silence fell over the hall. Journalists clicked frantically, capturing Caldwell's every reaction. The financial executives, some speechless, others relieved, realized that Victoria had just transformed a humiliating situation into a dazzling display of power and total control. Caldwell, red with shame and speechless, simply looked away. He had just lost not only the contract, but his credibility in front of the entire room. Victoria, on the other hand, remained standing, impassive, but inwardly satisfied. Respect, she thought, was not something to be asked for, it was something to be earned. The room hung on her every word, and Victoria knew that this was only the beginning of her revenge and triumph over Caldwell's arrogance and contempt. The silence that followed Victoria Armstrong's words was almost deafening. Every journalist, every executive, every assistant in the room held their breath. Caldwell, usually dominant and self-assured, stood frozen, red with anger and shame, unable to find a single reply. Victoria, impassive, took a step towards the screen and calmly added, "Henry, let me remind you that this company does not exist because of your advice or your money. Armstrong Industries is the result of 20 years of hard work, vision, and strategy. Everything you thought you controlled, everything you believed you could manipulate, rests on my decision, and mine alone." Television cameras and journalists' smartphones clicked frantically, capturing every moment. Caldwell approached the table, trying to regain his composure, but every word he uttered shattered against Victoria's icy certainty. I think there's been a misunderstanding," he stammered, but his words sounded hollow. The murmurs in the room turned into embarrassed whispers. The financial executives who had previously bowed before him now looked at him with surprise and a hint of disdain. Victoria continued, her clear voice echoing in the hall. "No, Henry. There's no misunderstanding. The $2 billion contract you thought you were closing is void. And I strongly advise you to think twice before you underestimate or humiliate someone in front of witnesses. Caldwell recoiled, red with shame, as his assistants crowded around him, visibly embarrassed. Reporters rushed to record the scene, some already whispering, "Unbelievable, the CEO humiliated him in public." Victoria calmly gathered her documents and took a few steps toward the exit. Every gesture was calculated, every movement demonstrated that she hadn't just won this moment, she had taken complete control of the situation. The finance executives then approached, some to congratulate her, others to ensure they were aligned with the woman who had just unequivocally demonstrated her authority. Humiliated, Caldwell left the hall under Victoria's piercing gaze. Every step he took echoed his defeat. He had tried to dominate her with arrogance and wealth, but she had won this battle. Victoria, for her part, turned to the journalists and said with a slight smile, "Respect isn't demanded. It's earned. And underestimating someone can be very costly." The hall erupted in murmurs of admiration and quiet applause. Victoria had just transformed an apparent humiliation into a resounding triumph, showing everyone that her composure, patience, and determination far surpassed Caldwell's arrogance. The lobby of the Ritz-Carlton had returned to a hushed calm, but the energy that pervaded it was now different. The admiring murmurs of financial executives and journalists testified to what they had just witnessed. Victoria Armstrong, a black woman, had transformed a public humiliation into a dazzling display of power and control. Victoria gathered her documents with quiet elegance and walked towards the journalists. Her voice was firm and composed, but each word resonated like a lesson in respect. Armstrong Industries is not just a company. It is the result of 20 years of work, innovation, and vision. And in this world, underestimating someone because of their appearance or gender is a mistake that comes at a high price. The journalists took notes on every word, some raising their phones to broadcast the scene live on social media. Impressed financial executives approached to congratulate her or to ensure that any future collaboration would be directly with her. Victoria had not only cancelled a $2 billion contract, but she had also publicly asserted her authority and legitimacy. Caldwell, for his part, had left the hall, furious and humiliated. His arrogance had been his own downfall. He had not only lost a contract, but his credibility and public image had been severely damaged. Sensing her work wasn't finished, Victoria took one last stroll through the lobby. She greeted the executives and journalists with a confident smile, leaving behind an aura of quiet power. Every gesture, every movement, every glance demonstrated that she was in complete control of the situation. This public triumph marked a decisive turning point for Victoria Armstrong. Not only had she shown that no arrogance or prejudice could make her bend, but she had also reminded everyone that true power does not reside in money or arrogance, but in competence, vision, and the ability to remain calm and strategic even in the face of the most humiliating provocation. As she left the lobby, Victoria knew this moment would be etched in memory. The financial markets, journalists, and investors would now see her not only as a competent leader, but as a woman capable of making even the most arrogant tremble. And for Caldwell, this lesson would be unforgettable. Underestimating Victoria Armstrong had been her biggest mistake. Victoria got into her car, her gaze fixed on the Manhattan skyline. Her victory was not just for this contract, but for respect, for authority, and to show that her place in this world did not depend on the acceptance of others, but on her own strength and determination.